It was April 1st, 1875, that Robert Thompson started Thompson's drugstore. Prior to that, he had come to Kent from Pennsylvania, where he had learned the machinist trade for the railroad. He arrived in Kent, spent a couple of years, and when he lost his job with the closing of the railroad yards, he bought the downtown location that Dr. J.W. Shively had at 100 West Main Street, the southwest corner, of Main and Water. Now the location, or recently, well, it's the Franklin Deli now, but for many years it was Donaghy's Drugstore and Carson's Corner Drugstore. He operated at that location for some 18 years, except for a brief relocation due to a fire the year after he purchased the store. Following those 18 years, he had the opportunity to move the store to what was considered the new block. The new block was across from the depot. More recently, it's known as Ray's Place. The total building was actually built as a hotel, Central Hotel, because across the street, also built in 1875, was our train depot. He remained at that location and was later joined by his son, Hale. Pictures of it are shown right there. And Hale had gone to pharmacy school at Ohio Northern. Robert Thompson had two sons, Spear, S-P-E-E-R, and Hale. Hale took an interest in the drugstore, and following a graduation in 1904 from Ohio Northern University, he became a registered pharmacist. A pharmacy graduate was actually the term that was used then, but he was able to pass the state boards and joined his father in the business. They remained at that Franklin location, where Ray's Place is now, for 15 years. About that time, his father was losing his health. He'd been in business for at least 34 years and was well respected in the community. But he had reached a point where his health didn't cooperate, and Hale took over the ownership of his father's store. At that point, Hale saw an opportunity to move to South Water Street, where he felt the business community was a little more lively. And for a 3-year period, from 1908 until 1911, he moved to within 80 steps of the square at 116 South Water Street. Some of you may remember that location as being where Hans Bakery had a significant fire and is now a vacant lot. From his 80 steps from the square, in 1911, he moved to 100 East Main Street on the square at the former site of the Frank Cone dry goods store. From 1911 until our closing of the store in 2004, a period of 93 years, we were located at 100 East Main Street, right across the street from where he had started. Hale had the front of the store remodeled in 1911, and again interior and exterior in 1915. And not being satisfied with even his beautiful front of the store and the leaded glass front, in honor of the 50th anniversary of the drugstore in 1925, he had it remodeled again. This was with a great celebration and a lot of gifts and a lot of hurrah. Merrill learned the trade of pharmacy by working at the store under Hale Thompson. He did not go to pharmacy school, but he had learned enough that he was able to pass the State Board of Pharmacy as a practical pharmacist and became registered. Keep in mind that from 1920, January 17th to be specific, until December 5th, 1933, a period of 14 years, was prohibition in the United States. What you're seeing in this picture is a certificate or a prescription to be given through the drugstore, where we were the only purveyors of legal alcohol in the United States. Drugstores provided it with a full selection of gin, several brands of whiskey, and doctors who were more than willing to write prescriptions for people who had medicinal needs of alcohol. Sometime in the early 30s, Charles Young went to work for Hale Thompson as an intern to learn the pharmacy trade. He continued with him for a year or two and then enrolled at Western Reserve University in Cleveland to become a registered pharmacist. He completed his training there and found a couple ready jobs waiting for him in Cleveland and Youngstown, and ultimately returned to his hometown of Kent and opened his own drugstore, Young's Drugstore, at 119 West Main Street, the site of several previous pharmacies. Ultimately, he had the opportunity in 1938 or 39 to buy out the controlling interest of Hale Thompson, who was becoming the president of First Federal Savings and Loan, changing careers. Charlie sold his store to Eddie Hord, and it became known as Hord's Drugstore. And Charles took over the primary ownership, the principal ownership, and became a partner with Merrill Thompson. They continued in business until the start of the World War II, when Charlie enlisted and became a paymaster similar to a warrant officer in the U.S. Navy stationed in the Aleutians in Alaska. At the time, Merrill and his wife and Charlie's wife, Tullis Young, who had been recently married, continued the drugstore throughout the war years. Following his return from the service, he hired another pharmacist by the name of Art Cherry, and following a brief period when Mr. Cherry was in Kent, Merrill Thompson and Charlie Young bought another drugstore in New Philadelphia, Ohio, from a Dr. Johnson. They sent their newly hired pharmacist Art Cherry to manage it, and shortly thereafter Mr. Cherry became the owner. Young remained very active in the business until his death, which was in December of 1993. About 1951, once again, the remodeling of the drugstore, as you see the picture here, complete with a smaller soda fountain, an enlarged greeting card section, an enlarged cosmetic section, and the eclectic sign that you see that hung on the corner of Main and Water. Shown here is a soda fountain list, probably in the 1950s. It indicates, because we had a very active soda fountain, ice cream sodas, sundaes, milkshakes, all 15 cents. One of the things that most of us remember from Kent who are old enough is that the milkshakes were always served with pretzels. This is a continuation showing the picture of the remodeling of the store in 1951. The National Bank, which was across the street, had modernized its older-looking building by putting up large green panels, and I guess we felt we had to catch up and be modern at the time, and unfortunately we removed the beautiful leaded glass front from Thompson's drugstore, and what you see was black baconite panels, aluminum trim, and the only thing that sustained us was that eclectic sign again. This shows the remodeling in 1966, And both the previous picture remodeling in 51 and 66 were primarily done by Charles Kistler again, with the help of Ray Stuber the second time around. Now you'll notice that the store is now twice as wide. We had taken over the shoe store of Miller Jones, which had been run by the Rubel family in Kent for a good many years. We doubled our size, cut the wall down between the two stores, and made for a much larger pharmacy. Sometime in the late 50s, maybe early 60s, we expanded to add another drugstore in the Streetsboro Plaza. It continued for some 36 years in business, serving the people of Streetsboro. And about 5 years after the beginning of that store, we opened one in Brimfield, which continued for 31 years. The managers of the store at the time became partners in Hale B. Thompson Incorporated, and included Charlie Young's son, Tom, myself, Jim Myers, Charles Parkinson, James Hostler, and ultimately Ed Marty and Bob Lovell. Those stores collectively represented 195 years of serving Portage County. Here's a picture of Charles Young and Tullis. She's wearing a corsage because this was the day that we celebrated the anniversary, probably the 100th anniversary of the store being in existence. Tullis was a registered nurse, and she also became an officer of Hale B. Thompson Incorporated. I'd also like to mention the children that Charlie and Tullis had. Oldest was Kathleen Lilly. Second was Tom Young, who became a pharmacist. Both Tom and Kathy became permanent employees of the drugstore, and then followed by that was their namesake, Charles Young Jr. In the meantime, I became manager of the drugstore, with Mr. Young being the principal owner, and decided along in 1988 to quit selling tobacco products. The reason being, we'd make deliveries to little old ladies that are on oxygen and sell them cigarettes at the same time. It just became something we couldn't live with. So effective July 1st of 1988, we'll no longer sell any tobacco products. Little did we realize when we put up that notice what publicity it would bring us as a drugstore. What really helped was that Charlie was such a heavy smoker and eventually decided to quit smoking. And it made it a lot easier to discuss this subject with him. Customers that we had included writers for both the Record Courier and the Beacon Journal, who were regular customers in our store, and when they saw the notice, they made a note of putting it in the paper. The Cleveland radio stations picked up on the Beacon Journal's articles regularly, and suddenly we had television coverage that went national, and even public radio that went international, talking about the fact that this little drugstore decided to quit selling a product that they could make a profit on. Previously, we had lost Merrill Thompson at the age of 65 in 1965. He died following a bout of the flu. Charlie lived to the age of 86 and died in 1993, having spent more than 50 years as a career at the drugstore. Over the years, we've been able to identify no less than 150 people employed by Thompson's drugstore. I'm sure we've missed some. We've probably missed quite a few because my experience only began in 1950, and there weren't many records that preceded it that included the names of employees. Over the years, Thompson's drugstore employed as many as 35 different pharmacists in their 3 locations. The insurance industry, which started back in the 60s, started on the benefit of the United Auto Workers, changed the whole picture of drugstores. And dealing with the insurance industry in order to get paid was one that caused most independent stores to go out of business. Our store was no exception, but we did last a little bit longer, a total of 128 years, until the early 2000 years, when it became apparent that I wanted to retire, my partners didn't want to buy out the store, and it was time that we looked for a purchaser. Several attempts and several letters went out to area pharmacies, area pharmacists, chains, and finally we settled on selling the store in January of 2004 to the Walgreens drugstore chain. We included this crankshaft cartoon, which kind of tells the story. In the first panel, here's crankshaft just reminiscing at a drugstore that has plywood covered up over its windows. In the second panel, it shows him with his dad having a soda that he remembered so fondly. Next, it's when he was courting his wife that they appeared at the drugstore. And later, there he was as a grandparent buying for his grandchildren a soda. And he left with a sigh, and his daughter asked, "What took you so long to come home?" And he said, "Well, I stopped to pay respects to an old friend who's passed on." That's the history of most drugstores. When we sold to Walgreens, we actually were selling our inventory and our prescription business. We did not sell the building because we did not own the building, we leased it. We were just a renter there. I point that out because a lot of people felt when later a tattoo parlor went in there that I was responsible for their being there, which was not the case. Anyway, here we are with quite a few antiques gathered over 128 years, and it's time to have a sale. As you can see by the clipping there, memories were for sale. And if you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner picture, Jim Hostler, one of my pharmacists, while I was vacationing in Florida, single-handedly brought from the basement of that drugstore all of the antiques that you see there and displayed them. Thank you, Jim. The lower picture is John Carson and I, who grew up as friends, grew up as competitors across the street from one another, used to go to college together at Ohio Northern, played in the same poker game, and John had just come over to wish us well since he had previously closed his store as well. We had planned a couple months in advance for the sale of our antiques, and I had hired a fellow pharmacist who was also an auctioneer, thinking he'll certainly know what he's dealing with and get the most money for us out of it. We had an appraisal done, and we had about $30,000 worth of antiques that an appraiser had given us an estimate on. 1 week before the sale, my auctioneer had a stroke and was unable to deliver on his end, but he did find me another auctioneer who, although he was a good auctioneer, he didn't seem to really appreciate the antiques that we had and the value of each one. One of the humorous stories that came out of it, though, maybe two, was the sale of an ice cream scoop that two customers who both owned ice cream shops got in a bidding match over. And it had been an antique scoop that we had had 75 to 100 years at the drugstore. Well, it turned out it ended up being bid up to $750 for that scoop. Midway through the sale, which was very well attended, someone inquired about the disposition of the sign outside. We hadn't even considered it and knew that ultimately we would have to take the sign down. When they made an acceptable offer to buy the sign, we jumped at it because it relieved us of the fact that we were going to have to spend money to have it removed. So now it was the responsibility of the person who made the offer to take it down. And the humorous part was when a fellow showed up with a pair of pliers and a small pickup truck and thought he was going to remove that sign all by himself. After maybe 3 or 4 different trips back and forth, you can see what finally removed the sign, and it's that big derrick. I'm sure it cost thousands to have it removed, and somebody was very happy to get it who apparently specialized in eclectic signs. Well, that's me in my crew cut days after I got out of the service. I had gone to Ohio Northern University and had taken an internship for Charlie and Merrill in the 1950s when I came out of high school and was attending Kent State University. I decided that pharmacy was a career that I wanted to go into, so I traveled to Ohio Northern and graduated in 1954. Shortly thereafter, I was drafted into the Army, and following my stint in Texas for all 3 locations that I took training at, I came back to Kent and had a job waiting for me. I spent from 1957 until 2004. Sounds like a long time, but that was a career that I loved and found it very rewarding. Just to mention a few statistics as they related to Thompson's 3 drugstores. Our sales totaled nearly $3 million per year, a yearly payroll of $350,000 with 25 to 30 employees. We filled roughly 100,000 prescriptions per year and paid $40,000 a year in taxes, let alone what our employees paid in taxes. We filled over 2 million prescriptions in Portage County. And it's interesting that in the first 75 years of the store, we had only filled 200,000 prescriptions, so that from 1947 on, 90%, or 1,800,000 prescriptions, were filled during that 128 history of the drugstore. Thank you so much for listening.